I couldn't be more proud to show those videos and pictures for the first time with the people that
Mm,
made that happen.
So
that was
let me
great.
start. Let me start with this question, and we've only got 6 minutes left, guys. I just want to draw out of each of you first. What did you feel like you lost when the Purdy's left camp? Jim, I'm gonna start with you. Like you were aware
Yeah,
of it right away. What
right.
was the loss for you?
I think the whole atmosphere in camp was fundamentally changed, and we really didn't know what the future is going to hold.
Make it
And
personal. What about Jim Olsen? How did it affect you personally?
boy, I was having a real hard time getting behind camp and trying to decide: am I going to vote with my
Yeah.
feet and go somewhere else, or am I going to try to stick it out? And I guess I'm very thankful and proud to say that camp's ministry never really wavered, and the
Yeah.
word was still being preached. And I saw that, and I thought, okay, the Lord still has His hand on this place, despite what's happened and the great sense of loss in the leadership and the legacy. I'm gonna hold out hope. I'm gonna still participate in the volunteer work weekends and attend church when I
Yeah.
could in the summer. And
Yeah.
yeah, and
I
here we
love
are.
that. I
Me
love your
too, Jimmy.
response.
Yeah,
Love
me
your
too.
response. It's
I'm so
as
glad
usual, thoughtful.
you followed that lead to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beth, how about for you?
I honestly, it was such a big hole because I worked on staff same as Kim Hawks from 1980 to 89. And, when you're there 10 years, 10 summers with,
Yeah.
you know, it's a huge hole personally because of the friendships and the importance
Yeah.
um, that they had become. And I do know that the Lord tapped me on the shoulder back then and just said, not now, but if you don't, because I hadn't gone back for a couple years after that, for the same reasons you were talking about. And we know Earl, you know, um, you aren't wrong when you say that that's how people felt.
Yep.
But I think the Lord sort of planted a seed that said, if you're not there, there's nothing you'll be able to do about it.
Moving. Yeah.
Don, how about you? I mean, we've talked about it some, but a 21-year gap. Your kids had no idea about where you grew up. Like you weren't, it was like off limits, the place where you played as a child, right? That is really rough.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not just like any place. It's where I grew up, like you said. But the fact that last summer it culminated in what you just saw, which is just a sliver of it. Like, I wasn't taking my phone around and everything we did. That was just a small fraction. But uh, I think just to build on that, like this past summer, we went back and went to the beach, and Jim and Beth took us on the boat ride. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to take the kids to the teepee for the first time, not to see
Yeah.
it there, but to see it like what it really is in the summer, to have like a hamburger or whatever. Uh, and but then the next day, for them to experience their first Sunday service, holy cow, that's been the most consequential thing for me.
Mm,
So,
amen.
Yeah.
so Jim, Don's kind of shared the second question, which is the restoration. What does that result in? But for you, now that that this 21-year gap is over and the Purdy family is welcome back in, and
Mm.
there's Purdy's on camp property again.
Hmm.
What does that do for you?
Boy, it was like, how the Lord answers prayer in three ways: yes, no, or wait a while. And okay, so yeah, we had to wait. But on that note, I got to say, providentially, I remember a letter that your uncle John Johansson wrote years ago, 22 years ago, Don, and he said that he looks forward to the day when Don Purdy stands on the auditorium stage once again at the podium. and I hope he's watching, because I remember that. And here we are. It came true, and the Lord answered prayer. And boy, it's been huge, and boy, we're just all so thankful.
Beth, how about for you?
I think the other thing that happened in that process is when Brooks was born, it 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 really caught my heart that, you know, Don wasn't running on the beach with his grandson.
Yeah.
And Don with his great grandson. It had really you know, sort of kind of kicked it up. But Joanne had said to me at the garage sale before that time, she said, you know, I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime. I've prayed every day that it would happen for my kids in their lifetime, but I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. And there was now I'll cry. But in that moment, you know, it was just, you just knew that everything, the waiting was well worth it. And
we're gonna get cut off,
you know,
guys.
anytime God
Can you?
he was
Okay.
I'm sorry, Beth. You were just showing us a picture. Could I see that again?
sure. I gotta hit the.
How are you going to reconcile? That's a lot of editing for me to do, to take what
It
she
is, 'cause
left off with doing before to now a picture.
Yeah.
I was, before you came on, Don knows I had given Dougie Schoen his first work crew because he had taken the grill tongs and he was terrorizing the girls in the teepee with it, mostly Jennifer Thompson. And somebody took a picture and gave it to me, but he's actually holding the grill tongs in his hand, which I never really noticed that in the picture
He's
before.
going to threaten you with those.
You caught him red-handed, right?
He probably did.
That's
Yep,
amazing.
he was caught red-handed several times with those
Yeah.
tongs.
No doubt. What a character, Doug Schoen. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. I was asking the question. Jim responded. Beth, you were in the middle of your response. We got cut off about, you know, the impact. The Purdy's coming back to camp obviously left a hole when they left, but
Right.
when they came back, I think you were describing how that impacted you from your perspective.
Well, I think it showed just how big God is, and that, you know, Joanne really felt it was impossible in her lifetime. And, you know, honestly, over the course of the span of time when we were working on the book, it was actually fairly easy. And so you knew he was in control, because things that shouldn't necessarily have happened fairly simply. I remember once Don described camp as the biodome, that he could put his hands on the bubble and look in but couldn't enter. And, you know, I think that's why it was so striking, that with his feet being on the ground, and it took a little bit of a feat to get him to step into camp.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that next, right? Explain to me the background. So Don, somehow you found out Don was considering writing this book. How did that happen? Are you guys in email contact, chat, phone calls? How did you hear he was writing this book?
We got together with Earl.
So
a lot in Rochester.
Earl was gossiping about Don, and you found out he's going to write this. He was thinking about writing this book.
No, we all got together. We had a reunion. We had a reunion after after Mrs. Ballman's funeral. We got together.
Okay.
We played golf.
So you guys all got together, and you found out this is what he was thinking about doing. Okay. How long from when you heard about that until you started thinking maybe we can play a part in this process of restoration with camp? I mean, was it immediate, or was that something that dawned on you later on in the process?
Well, Beth, I think your conversation with this lawyer from Atlanta was one of the initial events that really gave us the idea that, you know, hey, camp is going to be making some changes in their whole approach to its history. And so and again, we were hearing bits and pieces of this new idea of embracing the past, and so that kind of lend itself into the idea of, hey, Donnie's writing a book. What a better way to get him into camp and just kind of cement this, all together.
I would. That's a good point. So, Jim, for both of you, you mentioned playing golf. So, Jim, you got invited back to Earl's in Rochester. We played golf with Doug Hahn. Nate Forrester was there.
Yep.
He was going through a kind of a tough personal time. And I mentioned to you on the golf course, which, by the way, you played really good that day. What the heck? But I was
Because it was Southern
about,
Meadows.
yeah, if I was thinking about writing a book, this would be back, man, 21 maybe 22. Would you have some stories?
Yeah.
And you were like, sure. And I think you took that and you banked it and made it more. So Beth and I had been seeing each other from about the same year at Doug and Beth Hahn's house where he does
Pancake,
pancake breakfast. He's part of the former basketball clinic staff, and you live there. You're friends with Beth Ann, and we had a conversation. So they were kind of on separate paths. But when I finally decided I'm committed to this thing, I knew and I prayed about it, and I needed a couple people to help me collect stories. And you were the two that came in, like we talk about 1 and 1A. It was that. And then we started to have these Zoom calls in late 22 and then more frequently in 23. And before I was like 100% in, I'm like, okay, if you could both put out to your friends who are still at camp, because I, again, had kind of blocked them all off or not kept in contact with them. I said, call it a project. So I wasn't even using the word book. And you started to talk about, hey, it might be a good idea for you to come back and promote it. And I'm like, I didn't want to hear anything about it. But
yeah, so I mean, Don, that was your mindset for 21 years that I'm done with camp. There were no circumstances that you would return.
I wouldn't say there were no circumstances where I would return, but it would have to be a clear path that like the parting of the Red Sea.
So a God thing. It would need to be a God thing.
Yeah, and talking to Jim and Beth was not a parting of the Red Sea, but it was a little opening, and it was something where, but I was not looking for that. I was going to write that book for my kids,
right,
and for the family, and so they would know about this place that they've heard about, Camp in the Woods. So they would hear about it. And also for the friends that I have kept in touch with, there would be some written record of my own experience there. Whatever happened with it.
Would you call that a way? Is that a way for you to maybe manage the loss?
Yeah, I didn't frame it that way, but probably internally there was some of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
You also didn't have any inside information. People were very sensitive around you not to.
Yeah.
Right. It's like we would feel like it was rubbing it into your face, and so we were careful what we said because we weren't wanting to rub the fact that we were still at camp and, when we knew the situation.
But I would say this, Beth and Jim, like I never. I wouldn't think that of you, that you would ever. I never worried about that. Like for you, I knew, like what you just said in the previous segment, the reasons that you were, still part of camp were because it was more about what camp stood for than our family, and that was right. That was the right proportions to have in terms of what camp was about. Our family was a big part of it, but it was only a small part of what, God had been
Yeah.
doing there, and you were still part of that. So, but you
Well,
were
I
the
think God also told me I couldn't do anything to help that situation if I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
right. See, there you
Oh,
go.
and I think, Beth, what I'm hearing is this restoration may not have occurred if you and Jim had not made the choice to stick with camp.
Hmm. Quite true.
I would say it would have ultimately probably because I don't know if
Well,
you weren't
you're taking a
lawyer didn't come up to
fatalistic
me on the beach and
approach.
said,
I think you're taking a fatalistic approach that this was going to happen no matter what. However, then let me rephrase. The fact that you and Jim stayed at camp allowed you to be used by God in the restoration process.
correct.
Hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we were coming from a relationship with the family where others would have been coming from a board scenario. Even though, Jim
Sure.
Rumsey was there and I'm sure God would have used, his relationship, but um he just used us because of the relationship too. It's easier to hear things and believe things when, Don knows we wouldn't have steered him
Hmm.
No, no,
wrong in that sense.
and knowing Don, he didn't look at it as any kind of slight to his family that you guys stayed involved. That was your decision. I don't think he would ever hold that against you. In fact, I think looking 21 years later, the way God used you to bring that restoration is really a wonderful thing.
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
It's
it,
one of the
it
biggest
just
honors I've ever had. The biggest honor of my life, at least in the last few years. And I'm very, very thankful.
it it was the desire of our heart as well, and God was able to use us to bring that around. But
Hmm.
honestly, it's really all there were so many pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We were just kind of, I think I used a term with Jack Zimmerman that Jimmy and I kind of have the front row seat from the other side. And I I think that the fact that the relational part, which is so important, the love that we've just all had for each other and the respect for each other is ultimately, I think, you know,
Yeah.
it's I don't know. It's just different than if somebody, brings you a letter or hands you your pass.
It's personal.
This was an emotional situation,
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like it's family.
Hmm.
right?
Right.
right.
Yes. Nothing half-hearted about it at all. We were both feet in from the beginning.
Yeah, no doubt. And Jack is so integral in this. I mean, obviously, um,
Yes.
I don't know if my mom and dad would ever have gone back if not for him. He was on his own independent path from a higher camp level to do that, led for his own reasons. But when Jim Rumsey called me to say that he had talked to Jack about Jack wanting to connect with me, to ask my dad to see if he would meet with him, to accept an invitation to come back. Um, that probably still happens,
Mhm.
if not for what happened with us. However, I don't believe that I would have been as receptive to his call if not for you and everything that happened before that. And like when I talked to him that day in August, I'll never forget it. I was just about to come up for the 4 o'clock forum, that you had set up and Jim Rumsey. And it made it seem like it was a coordinated effort. Like, oh, this is just something that happened because of that. But I found out it really wasn't. But had that not happened, I would have been really skeptical, of
Hmm.
his call. And I,
No.
I, I don't know how I would have, like when I called my dad that day after Jack called, I was enthusiastic. I'm like, Dad, you got to talk to him. This is exciting. He really, there's a lot going on here at camp. And it's funny because they weren't necessarily coordinated, but had that not happened, I might have sat on that And I don't think that the videos and pictures that we saw that happened, I, I believe, yeah, I still would have been there if you had asked me in August. But what happened in October probably doesn't happen if not for you. And that meeting with Jack probably
Mhm.
doesn't happen then. I think my dad would have taken a lot longer to think about it before he accepted it. And
Well, it took
all about
you
timing, yeah.
it took you
Don,
from February. It took you from February to realize that we were just telling you things had changed at camp, and we think that
yeah,
this is a reality, and we wouldn't steer you wrong because we would never put you in a situation where the door would be slammed and get your hopes up and slam the door.
just so you
So you
know,
were getting some of those messages, and still we're going like this.
just so you know, Beth, that was Don saying thank you. So, Don, Don, I only have two questions left then for you. One is, was there some point in time where you changed your mind, right? You went from there'd be some rare circumstance I'd ever go back to camp. Your heart shifted at some point. Was it gradual? Was there some event? Was it just Jim and Beth chipping away at you slowly? How would you describe it?
Excellent setup. And Jim and Beth were chip away at me slowly. and and yeah, they
Good
would
work,
ask at
guys.
the end of, for the book project, they would at the end like, oh, by the way, we would still love to have you for the 4 o'clock forum. We've been talking to Jim, Rumsey, and Carol. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But then it was in April of that year, and they said, we've been talking to Jim and Carol Rumsey, and they would love to help you with the book and some stories. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, they would be great resources. I mean, think about what their personal histories are.
Yeah.
And then so they said, would you want to do a Zoom call with them like we've been doing? And I said, sure, yeah, that would be great. So they brought them on, and they're in one of these windows. And Jim and Carol came on. Hey, heard the book. It sounds awesome. By the way, we want to have you here for the 4 o'clock forum. They were like, boom, right into it. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I said, oh, okay. Now, listen, obviously I knew what the value of that would be to go back to camp,
Yeah.
and to whatever extent I wanted to get the word of the book out there as best I could. There couldn't be a better opportunity than to go there and to accept the 4 o'clock forum and have it. And but there was still this huge issue of, my parents, and they hadn't been back, and they lived 5 miles away.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't need their permission, but I would have to have their
Yeah.
blessing to do it, as you said,
Yeah.
Tom.
Mhm.
And so I said, oh, let me give you a few weeks. So I just happened to be scheduled to go down to visit my parents in Florida for a few days. And I brought it up by the pool. I brought it up to my mom, and she's like, "You should do it."
Mm.
My dad, of course, was like, "Oh boy, I don't know." I kept trying to tell him everything that Jim and Beth were saying, and Jim Rumsey, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't know with this book. You probably can't use Camp in the Woods in the title. Their lawyers are going to be," and but eventually he came around, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Okay, and so I ended up doing it. The pivot point was then when Jim and Carol Rumsey came on, and I
Combined with your
said,
parents,
combined
combined with
with
your
that, I
parents.
said,
Yeah.
okay, I'll come up. And I still was hesitant. And finally, I went to ride my bike one day in late
Not the lake.
July, early August, and I called Jim Olsen. And I'm like, Jim, I'm telling you, I'm going to do this. I'm coming. He's like, oh, no, that'd be great. I said, okay, I'm not putting this in writing. I'm telling you, I plan to come up.
Hmm.
And he's like, okay, I'll tell him to set it up.
I
And
think we
I was
penciled
still
it
giving
in.
myself a little bit of an out, like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so
So last question for you then, Don. We need to meet with your parents like this at some point because I'd love to have this discussion. But as an observer, as a close observer of your parents and the impact this restoration's had, can you describe maybe what you think it has meant to them? Because I think Jim and Beth need to hear it's not just impacted you, it's impacted everybody named Purdy um, in your family.
appreciate that, Tom. Yeah. It's crazy to think about for all of the memories, for all the lifelong memories. Basically, all of my aunts and uncles met each other there. I hopefully in the book it's well documented what my dad's history was there. It's like
Yep.
his whole career, my mom, and so somehow after '02, despite living in the same town, all of those memories just got shelved. They were all
Just memories.
there's visual reminders about, Camp in the Woods things around the house and, family things that come up, but somehow they had to try to keep like that bubble around them and not hear. And when I went back in August of 23, thanks to Jim and Beth for the 4 o'clock forum, and I told them everything that happened that day. And then that night we were up late. And then the next morning we were there. I had intended to go home kind of mid morning on Sunday, ended up being late, early afternoon. But I went back. My my mom said, so my dad was, spewing all these camp stories, like just a fountain of them. And she's like, Don, do you realize you're sharing things you haven't shared in all these years? And I looked at her and I'm like, just don't let this happen. Don't
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get this interrupted.
Let it flow.
Yeah, let it flow. Don't and
Yeah.
but it was right there where I knew we had a lot of momentum. There was still a lot of work to do, but thanks so much to what Jim and Beth had done and with Jack and then with
Hmm.
others at camp were following there, Jim Hammond and others. But Tom, you and I had this consistent conversation going on too that we were gonna keep talking about things that were important to us in life, and one of them was Camp in the Woods,
Yep.
and it was gonna be um, something important, but not first and foremost. But because of everything that's happened, what we're doing now and all the podcasts that we've had and all the ones that we're going to continue to have, camp has become like the theme. That was never going to happen if not for the events that transpired.
Chapter 18.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I guess I have one more question for all of you. Like, what does the future look like?
Mm. Future so bright. I gotta wear shades.
I mean, for
Well, it's also nice for us to be able to be part of Don's kids' lives, and that we were
Mm.
kind of missing
yeah,
that because without camp and without that common place, and I know I can speak for Jimmy on this one. We just love his kids,
Mhm.
and we love spending time with them, and we love watching them look at camp through those
yeah.
eyes that when I was a kid, I saw the same look in my own eyes that I see in theirs. So
Yeah, the privilege continues to build some memories in for Donnie's family, and I'm so happy to be part of that. And yeah, better late than never, but it's already started. Just taking them out in the boat, tubing, and maybe some winter sports coming up. And yeah, I'm excited for this. Not
and
having to
also
learn.
and also for Tracy and Scott, we're hoping Tracy and Scott, are going to be able to feel the love, and we wish we knew their kids
Absolutely.
as well, and the options there. We know they're on the other side of the the west the west side, but we miss them as well.
The company I work for has an office in Seattle. I keep trying to come up with a reason to go there so I can visit them.
Tom has been in contact with Tracy a lot through their business with the bowls and the artwork, and
an artist. Yeah. So Don, just to wrap us up then, I mean, what's the future hold for your family and your parents?
Well, we're the groundwork has been laid. Like we're mom and dad, they're ready. They don't go just last summer they didn't pop in for any reason, but when the Trading Post needed more books, they called me, and I had some planted at Dad's house, so he brought them over and ended up spending an hour and a half with some old friend that he ran into on the Orandaga's porch. Mom went into with Jan Rask Harding for meals at Woodlands or the dining hall, and then with Leslie Wertman, and where she coordinated a lunch with
your dad was there too.
Well, my dad was there too. Okay, see, I didn't even know that. Yeah,
he was. They were both there. He left early because Leslie and your mom were going to spend the rest of the day together.
Okay,
but your dad was at lunch.
See, there we go. I didn't even know that. So you shared that picture. I should put that on the end of this episode. But yeah, it's funny, Tom, for all the people that we talked to. You have really delved into the details of what's happened in a way that we haven't come close to before. And as it relates to the release of this podcast, it's around Christmas time. I've always been looking for a time to release those videos, but to couple them with the conversations that we're having with Beth, and you look great, and Jim, of course, we've been in contact, and this all seems a perfect time to get this out there. So thank you for leading it.
Yeah, part of me wishes we could have talked with Beth sooner, of course, but I think
but
we know what we're doing a little better now. So we had a better interview, Beth, than we would have, at the very beginning. Not that the interview with Jim wasn't good.
I'm certain that's true.
We have more to do with Jim with the Boat Boy interview. Yeah,
we sure do.
I still have a few stories to share sometimes. So, but.
We're gonna hold you to that.
We got some stuff to share. I should actually give you the link too for the 4 o'clock forum, because the love that was shared by the people there toward Don was, we didn't manufacture that. We just set up the meeting, and everything from all the stories about you being babysat, by Jim Rumsey and your uncle, and another woman that babysat you, and just the love and the concern for, what are your parents doing? And I'm pretty sure it made it clear how much, you and your family have been missed.
Yeah, we should post that link on Donnie's Facebook page for the book.
Yeah, because it really was, it was fun to hear the stories too. I mean, there were a lot of great stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the love was definitely evident.
Just to wrap up, I have one last question for Jim and Beth. So Don and I have talked about this maybe on one episode, but we've talked about it a couple times off episode. Would you guys be willing to help us if we wanted to get a camp reunion going, maybe in 26?
Most certainly.
Yeah. Camp has also actually done a lot for this 175th. They're going to have a reunion every week for any staff that happens to be there. Okay. And then week 9 is an opportunity for any other staff that want to come on a specific time. So camp is actually going to help a little bit with that, but not all reunions have to happen at camp. I mean, certainly the ones we've had at Earl's, different pockets of reunions stir all kinds of stuff. And then ultimately, I think, we might be able to get an even bigger one going with camp.
Yeah, I
But
think
certainly,
we're gonna.
we love this. We love our peeps.
Yeah, I think it'd be a blast to get as large a group as we can, and maybe stream it, have some type of program with you guys helping us out. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right,
Count on us.
we'll talk more about that for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Great
Beth,
idea.
thanks
Jackie
for
Lutz
spending.
said it when she said it's in your blood.
If it's in your blood, yes. Beth, I really appreciate the interview that we had before Jim joined. Jim, always awesome talking with you. And I want to personally thank you guys for what you did to help Don get his book together. And then also the restoration process. It's just, I love your part in all of that.
Well, Tom, I appreciate what you've done here too, because I knew obviously we were going to talk about this, bringing Beth on and then bringing Jim on for the back end. But, of course, you ask questions that I wouldn't have necessarily felt, to get into as deeply as you did. But leave it to you. You're just you get right into it. Yeah, no, thank you, because it brings out things that even more deeply than I.
It's an important topic for the people who watch this. That this is a very important topic.
And I think I want to reiterate the fact that Jack Zimmerman's part in this. I mean, he gave us an ear and took it to heart, and his piece of this is massive.
Yeah,
I want to get him on.
So
I love that. Yeah. Well,
so he just did a wonderful job.
Yeah. It's in my conversations with him, all of this has been deeply meaningful to him on his own, and for camp reasons and personal reasons. And I would like to think that hopefully he'll see this and it'll all come together even more about
I think it's a great story of what God's done here.
Yes.
And I think it does nothing but promote camp.
Yeah.
Jim, you missed. I gave a reading test to Don and Beth, so when you watch the episode, it's pretty good.
I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah. Well, when we do our boat boy group one, Jim's gonna have to help lead that one too. So
Love it.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks so much.
We hope Joanne enjoyed it.
She will.
Yes, Mrs. Purdy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
All right.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yes, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.